with the neo-Nazi narrative? Well, again, like any successful type of propaganda, it has a kernel of truth. What they specifically, in the past, they used to just go with the line "Mud Azov Battalion," right? That was the specific line. Now they're trying to make it more generalized. Mud Azov Battalion is slightly closer to the truth, right? There is indeed, at least in terms of symbolism and paraphernalia and whatever, yes, there are a few elements that can be definitely considered not National Socialist or Fascist, but outright Nazi. Yes, that's true. However, what people don't seem to understand is that in wartime, well, you don't go to war with the army you dream about. You go to war with the army you have. Mm-hmm. And these kinds of, yes, extremist paramilitary groups tend to be very goddamn useful when you're being invaded. Okay.
Yeah, and there aren't just outright neo-Nazis. Even Antifas on Twitter have been very adamant to publicly declare their support for the Ukrainian government, and some of them are fighting there right now. Hell, even Chinese from Reddit went to fight in the Ukraine war. So it's not just everybody is a neo-Nazi.
Yes, well, where the Russian propaganda goes, I was about to say goes AWOL, goes haywire. Is when they extrapolate from the tiny element that is a subset of the larger organization called the Azov Battalion. They try to extrapolate from that to all of the paramilitary groups and individuals that are now fighting against Russia on behalf of Ukraine. That is definitely a lie. First of all, the Azov Battalion right now is not even the largest. It used to be, in 2014 it was, the largest private military organization under the Ukrainian flag. Today it's not. It's not even the second or the third largest. Mm-hmm. There are much bigger fish out there. And of course, the reason Russia is doing that is this propaganda campaign with neo-Nazi stuff is twofold. One, to try to peel away from Western sympathy towards Ukraine writ large. And second, because they're trying to get the enemy, Ukraine, to stop fighting in such a decentralized manner, which makes it impossible for the invader to predict the moves. Because the Russian brass can definitely predict most or some of the moves of the Ukrainian regular army. They may even have a lucky guess with regards to what the civilians would do. But good luck predicting what the private organizations would do. Because the private organizations, even if you intercept their communications, some of them speak to each other in English, some of them speak to each other in Swedish. There are a lot of Finns and Swedes, so good luck with that. Some of them speak in Arabic, yes. And some of them speak some of these more minority languages in Russia and Ukraine, like Tatar or Kazakh. So good luck with that, right? Even if you intercept their communications, by the time you get them translated, already some Kiev champagne has befallen on your unit. Sorry. So that's another reason why Russia is now trying to paint them all as neo-Nazis, in the hope of demoralizing a few of them, and also in the hope of lowering the support that Ukraine is getting from the West, the political support.
Yeah, I would say there is a third facet to this one. It's also about selling the war on the domestic front.
Yes, that's true.
And this is tied to what happened in history. So when Nazi Germany invaded Ukraine during the Operation Barbarossa, the Germans were actually very surprised that the Ukrainian population was not exactly very supportive, but pretty supportive of the German war effort, which is something that absolutely fucking enraged Stalin. And he somehow predicted this beforehand, which is why he sent quite a lot of Tatars and also Kalmyks right in the middle of Siberia, because he knew they were part of the population that got purged during the Holodomor, along with the native Ukrainians. So he intercepted it. He said the rationale behind why would the minorities join on the side of Germany, will. It was a good call back then, but he didn't expect the Ukrainians as a whole to be that more supportive, which is why even now there are still indeed some Nazi sympathizers, but from a cultural ground, because the rationale in their case is pretty simple. Well,
Fuck Stalin.
Well, what did Stalin and the Russians do? They turn us into cannibals.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good reason that you cannot argue with.
one of the reasons why I run away as fast as I can from discussions related to World War II is precisely because I'm bored with the topic. And because too often a lot of nuances are intentionally missed or left out from the discussion. For instance, there are Nazi sympathizing Jews in Finland. Huh? How does that sound?
Go figure that one out.
And you don't have to trust me. The Guardian, of all places, had a few interviews with some of those Juden who are like, well, you know what? We weren't fighting on the side of Hitler. We were fighting against Stalin. Fuck Stalin. Mm-hmm. Same thing in Ukraine, right? There's a lot of sympathy, not necessarily for the National Socialist Popular German Party, German Workers' Party, but sympathy in the sense of, well, at least these guys aren't Stalin. All right. As you mentioned Holodomor a bit earlier, Ukrainians already had a lot of experience on what Stalin means. Mm-hmm. So they were like, okay, I'm going to fight alongside with anyone who's not Stalin. Hopefully we get rid of Stalin. Well, that didn't happen, but it was worth a shot. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. If you had been in their place, you would have probably made a very similar choice. Okay? So, there's that. So basically what now the Putinist regime is doing is essentially taking all of those facts, mixing them together with some fiction, and taking some of the conclusions and ascribing to them a different cause than the real one, which makes it very difficult, especially for people who don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, makes it very difficult for people to track it down, to see what the truth is. And they use that to say, well, all Ukrainians are neo-Nazis, and all the regime in Kiev is a neo-Nazi regime, which would make it the first neo-Nazi regime run by a Jew. But okay,
yeah, that's true. But it also because of the fact that trying to sell a war against Ukraine is a pretty difficult ordeal, considering that internally on the domestic front, as I mentioned to complete my previous statement. Because Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union. There are a lot of Ukrainians working in the Russian Federation now. A lot of Russians have either visited Ukraine or know Ukrainians or moved outright to Ukraine. Okay, either voluntarily or they were forced to in the past. But trying to use any other rationale except the Nazi boogeyman, which is the one that functioned during the Second World War, because in their case it wasn't the Second World War, it was the Great Patriotic War against National Socialism. Yes. So that's why this neo-Nazi narrative made a comeback, because it was easier to sell it this way rather than sell it any other way.
Not to mention that it's not even a Soviet thing. Even back in the days of the Tsarist Empire, a disproportionate portion, so a significant minority of the Russian elite in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, again, starting at least from early 1800s, so 100 years before the Soviet Union was a thing, Ukrainians were overrepresented in the imperial elite and later on in the Muscovite elite. I mean, heck, even the presidents, well, the general secretary of the Soviet Party of Labor, that would be the English translation. Even many of those were Ukrainians, right? I mean, Stalin was Georgian, and Lenin was a Russian, but all the others were, well...
No, even Nikita Khrushchev is Ukrainian.
Yes, Nikita Khrushchev was Ukrainian, yes, and he was not the only... So, there's that. The great writer and playwright Gogol, well, actually his name was Hohol, and was Ukrainian. And so on and so forth. So you can understand why it's very difficult for Putin to sell the war on the domestic front. But, you know, Nazi American funded biolabs, well, it's worth a shot, and it seems to be sort of working-ish. It's not really working as intended, but it's sort of working. I mean, at least you get 40 or 50% for the war support for the war effort, which is much better than zero.
or not even zero, outright minus.
but it may indeed in the end prove itself not to be enough to support it for the long run. So yeah, that's these are basically the two narratives that Damianki had. I hope that answered the question in a decent enough fashion.